Welcome. Enjoy the video. Subscribe and turn on notifications. I was halfway through a mind-numbing spreadsheet when my phone buzzed. Mrs. Jenkins' name flashed across the screen. Strange. She'd never called me before. Just the occasional wave from her porch or small talk about her roses. Rick? Oh, thank goodness. I wasn't sure if I should, but I had to call. Her voice quavered, setting off instant alarm bells. What's wrong, Mrs. Jenkins? There are 2 men in your house right now with Jessica. She paused, her breath catching. And Rick? That isn't the first time. I've seen them before. Always when you're at work. My stomach dropped. The fluorescent office light suddenly felt too bright, too harsh. I gripped my desk edge until my knuckles went white. Are you absolutely sure? The words came out thick like syrup. I may be old, but my eyes work just fine. That black SUV parks 2 houses down every Tuesday and Thursday. Same time, like clockwork. I was already grabbing my keys, blood rushing in my ears. The 20-minute drive home stretched like elastic. Every red light was an eternity. My mind raced through the past months. Jessica's new yoga classes, her sudden interest in afternoon book clubs, the growing silence between us at dinner. Mrs. Jenkins was waiting on her porch when I pulled up, wringing her hands in her floral housecoat. She hurried down her walkway, surprisingly spry for her age, and grabbed my arm before I could head to my house. Inside, quickly, she whispered, tugging me toward her door. There's more you need to know before you go charging in there. The familiar smell of potpourri hit me as she ushered me into her living room. Family photos and ceramic cats watched from every surface. As Mrs. Jenkins perched on the edge of her floral armchair, her eyes huge behind those thick glasses. Mrs. Jenkins' words echoed in my head like a broken record. All those late nights Jessica claimed to be working, the sudden interest in her appearance, the emotional distance, it all clicked into place. My hands trembled as I gripped my phone, punching in Mike's number. Rick? What's wrong? Mike's voice carried that familiar, steady tone from his cop days. Need you at my place now, my voice cracked. It's Jessica. Mike didn't hesitate. On my way, don't do anything stupid. I paced the driveway, my truck already positioned to block any escape attempts. The weight of my firearm pressed against my hip, a cold reminder of what I might have to face. My police training from years ago kicked in. Secure the perimeter, control access points, maintain tactical advantage. Mike's SUV rolled up 20 minutes later. He stepped out, reading my face like an open book. His broad shoulders tensed as I filled him in on Mrs. Jenkins' observations, the strange car showing up when I worked late shifts, the suspicious timing, the hushed conversations. Here's what we do. Mike laid out the plan, his experience showing. I'll take the back, you take the front. We coordinate through text. No heroics, no confrontation, until we're sure. I nodded, chest tight with anger and betrayal. The house loomed before us, once a symbol of our life together, now holding secrets I never wanted to uncover. My breath came in short bursts as I checked my firearm one last time. The familiar weight did little to steady my racing thoughts. My hands shook as I typed out a message to Mike, confirming positions. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across our once-perfect lawn, and somewhere inside my wife was probably with him, oblivious to the storm about to break. Walking up to my house with Mike beside me, my heart hammered against my chest. We'd done this dance countless times during his days on the force, the silent approach, the coordinated entry. But this was different. This was my home. Mike caught my eye and gestured toward the back of the house. I gave him a quick nod and moved toward the front door. My key slid into the lock with familiar ease. but everything else felt wrong. Through the door, I heard Jessica's laugh, that tinkling, flirtatious sound that used to make my heart soar. Now it twisted my gut into knots. I crept through the foyer, following the sound of voices and clattering glasses coming from our dining room. Jessica's voice carried clearly, light and playful, the kind of tone she hadn't used with me in months. Rounding the corner, I froze. Jessica lounged at the head of our dining table, wineglass in hand, flanked by two men I'd never seen before, all of them sweaty, like after some kind of physical activity. They all turned at my entrance, their laughter dying instantly. Jessica's face shifted from surprise to irritation, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing home?" Her tone dripped with annoyance, like I was interrupting something important. My hands clenched into fists. "What am I doing home, in my own house?" "Oh, don't start with the dramatics." She took another sip of wine. "We're just having drinks." "Just having drinks?" The rage building inside me surprised even myself. "With two strange men in our home." One of the men, slick suit, expensive watch, smirked. "Easy there, buddy. No need to get worked up." I stepped forward, blood roaring in my ears. "I'm not your buddy." "Rick, you're embarrassing me," Jessica snapped. "This is business." "Business?" I slammed my hand on the table. "Since when does business involve wine and giggles in our dining room?" Mike appeared in the doorway behind the two men, his presence solid and reassuring. Jessica's eyes flicked between us, her lip curling. "Oh, perfect, you've brought backup. How pathetic." Her words hit like physical blows, but my anger kept me standing. Pathetic? I'm pathetic for caring about our marriage. "Marriage?" She laughed, cruel and sharp. "Is that what you call this? Working 60 hours a week while I sit here alone? I was building a life for us." "No, you are hiding from life, from me." She waved dismissively at her companions. "You can go. This little drama isn't worth your time." The men stood, exchanging knowing looks that made my blood boil. Jessica watched them leave, then turned back to me with cold eyes. "You want to know the truth, Rick? You're boring. Predictable. I'm suffocating in this perfect little life you've built." Her words stripped away years of trust and love, leaving nothing but raw pain and fury in their wake. Later that evening, I sat on Mike's leather couch, nursing my fourth whiskey of the night. The ice clinked against the glass as my hand trembled slightly. The living room felt both foreign and familiar. I'd been here countless times before, but never like this, never as a refugee from my own life. Mike paced near the window, his stocky frame casting long shadows in the dim light. His face had that same concerned look from our old patrol days, when things went sideways. "You've got options, Rick. Clear-cut case of infidelity. Any lawyer worth their salt would get you a favorable settlement." The word lawyer made my stomach turn. I knocked back the rest of my drink, welcoming the burn. "I can't even process that right now, Mike. 20 years together, and she just..." My voice trailed off. Mike grabbed the bottle and topped off my glass without asking. The amber liquid swirled as memories of Jessica flooded back. Our first date, our wedding day, this morning's coffee cup still sitting on our kitchen counter. Each image felt like a knife, twisting deeper. "You can't go back there," Mike's voice cut through my thoughts. "Not after what you saw. She made her choice." I slumped deeper into the couch. I keep replaying it. Maybe I missed something. Maybe if I'd been home more. "Don't do that to yourself," Mike interjected sharply. "This isn't on you." Sleep felt impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, in our bed. The bed we picked out together at that store in Milwaukee. The bed where we'd made plans, shared dreams, built a life that now lay in ruins. "I should have seen it coming," I muttered, more to myself than to Mike. Mike stopped pacing and settled into the armchair across from me. His eyes, though tired, held their characteristic intensity. "Nobody sees this coming. That's what makes it betrayal." The truth in his words hit harder than the whiskey. I stared at my glass, watching the ice slowly melt, feeling just as dissolved inside. The vibration of my phone pulled me from a restless sleep. An unknown number. I squinted at the screen, my head throbbing from last night's whiskey. The image loaded and my stomach dropped. There she was, Jessica, her auburn hair catching the neon bar lights. She was pressed against some guy, one of those faces from last night. Their drinks clinked together in a frozen moment of celebration. Her smile, that same magnetic smile that once drew me in, now belonged to someone else. The timestamp read 2:37 a.m. I zoomed in on the photo. The wedding ring was already off her finger. 8 years of marriage, and she couldn't even wait 12 hours before flaunting her newfound freedom. My hands shook as I saved the photo. Evidence. That's what it was now. Just evidence. I pulled up my contacts and scrolled to David Harrison, the lawyer who'd handled my parents' estate. 3 rings before his secretary answered. I scheduled an appointment for that afternoon, my voice steadier than I expected. Between calls to the bank and HR at work, I kept coming back to that photo. Each glance fed something dark and bitter growing inside me. The same hands that had held mine at the altar were now wrapped around another man's neck. The same lips that whispered, "I love you," every morning were pressed against someone else's ear. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror while splashing cold water on my face. Dark circles under my eyes, stubble covering my jaw. I barely recognized myself. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else, a hardness I hadn't seen before. Jessica wanted to play games? Fine. But I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. The lawyer's office was 20 minutes away. I gathered my documents, each paper a piece of our life together that needed to be dismantled. The photo burned in my phone like a loaded gun, ready to be used when the time came. After advice from Mike, I finally took control of our finances. Freezing the accounts and cutting off Jessica's access felt like a necessary evil, one I should have done sooner. I was signing the last paperwork at the bank when my phone buzzed. The text from Jessica made my stomach turn. "You pathetic small man. Is this how you prove you're in control? Real mature." My hands shook as I read it over and over. Each word felt like a knife calculated to cut deep. I'd spent 15 years with this woman, and now every message dripped with venom. Mike noticed my expression darken. "Well, let me see that." He read the text and handed the phone back. "This is good, Rick. She's lashing out because you've got her cornered. The Jessica charm isn't working anymore, so now she's showing her true colors." He was right. The mask had slipped, revealing the manipulator beneath. All those years I'd been blind to the red flags, her constant need for validation, the way she'd twist situations to her advantage, how she'd make me question my own judgment. The woman I'd fallen in love with was just a carefully crafted illusion. My phone rang again, but this time it was Mrs. Jenkins. Her voice carried its usual urgency, but there was real concern there, too. "Rick, there's a moving truck outside your house right now. That wife of yours is loading up everything." "What?" I gripped the phone tighter. "Are you sure?" "I'm watching them carry out your leather couch as we speak, the expensive one you bought last Christmas." Mike was already grabbing his keys before I ended the call. The drive to my house felt endless, even with Mike breaking speed limits. We pulled up to find Jessica directing two movers, carrying my grandfather's antique dresser. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I stormed up the driveway. Jessica turned, a cold smile playing on her lips. "Taking what's mine, honey. You want to play dirty with the accounts? Fine. I'm just collecting my share." "Your share? That dresser belonged to my grandfather." "Community property, Rick. I've got just as much right to it as you do." She examined her manicured nails with exaggerated disinterest. Mike stepped between us, his presence commanding attention. "Ma'am, you need to stop this right now. You can't legally remove these items during ongoing divorce proceedings." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Oh, look, you brought your attack dog. How predictable." She signaled the movers to put down the dresser. "Fine, but don't think this is over, Rick. Not by a long shot." She strutted to her car, pausing only to call over her shoulder. "You have no idea what's coming." The movers looked confused, but quickly packed up and left when Mike flashed his old police badge. I stood in my driveway, watching Jessica's taillights disappear around the corner, feeling both relieved and hollow. Yesterday afternoon, I was at Mike's place discussing our next moves when the doorbell rang. Mike opened the door, and there stood Chris, the man I'd seen with Jessica. My blood boiled at the sight of him. But something was off. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by dark circles under his eyes and wrinkled clothes that looked slept in. "I need to talk to Rick," he stammered, hands trembling. "It's important." Mike stepped between us as I rose from my chair. "You've got some nerve showing up here." Chris pulled out a flash drive from his pocket. "Please, she's not who you think she is. I was an idiot, and I'm not the only one." I nodded to Mike, who reluctantly let Chris enter. He collapsed into a chair, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. "Jessica, she's been playing us all," Chris started. "When I met her, she made me feel special, like I was the only one who understood her. But there were others, so many others." He plugged in the flash drive, pulling up emails between Jessica and various men. Financial records showed systematic transfers from multiple accounts. Then came the recordings, her voice crystal clear as she promised different men the same things she'd promised me. "She has this pattern," Chris continued. "She finds guys who have something she wants. Money, connections, whatever. Makes them feel like they're saving her from an awful marriage. Then she bleeds them dry." The evidence was overwhelming. Jessica hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been orchestrating a complex web of manipulation, leaving a trail of destroyed relationships and empty bank accounts in her wake. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Chris said, his voice cracking. "I just thought you should know the truth. She's going to keep doing this to people unless someone stops her." Looking at the man who helped wreck my marriage, I felt something unexpected. Pity. He was just another victim of Jessica's schemes, though that didn't make his actions right. Mike stood in the corner, arms crossed, analyzing every word. "How long have you been collecting this evidence?" "Since I realized what she really was. When I found out about the others, when I saw what happened to them, I knew I had to do something." I sat across from my lawyer, David, in his office, watching as he scrolled through the contents of the flash drive on his computer, his eyebrows raised higher with each document he opened. "These bank statements are gold," he muttered, clicking through more files. "She's been systematically draining your joint accounts for months." My stomach churned as I remembered discovering those transactions. She always had an excuse for needing extra cash. Home improvements, new furniture, spa treatments for stress relief. I was so blind. David pulled up another document. "Look at this." She opened 3 separate credit cards in your name. The spending patterns show regular charges at hotels, high-end restaurants. He paused, glancing at me. All while you were at work. I rubbed my face, trying to maintain composure. The evidence was there in black and white. Every betrayal, every lie, every manipulation cataloged in neat digital files. The scope of Jessica's deception was staggering. There's more, David continued. These emails between her and various accounts, she's been planning this for almost a year, setting up separate bank accounts, consulting with other lawyers about divorce proceedings, even looking into properties in other states. The methodical way she'd orchestrated everything made my blood run cold. While I'd been putting in extra hours to build our future, she'd been systematically dismantling our present. The good news, David said, leaning back in his chair, is that this gives us significant leverage. Financial fraud, identity theft. These aren't just divorce issues anymore. These are criminal matters. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of control. What's our next move? We document everything, create timelines, build an airtight case showing the systematic nature of her actions. David started typing notes. We'll need statements from your bank, credit card companies, receipts for any major purchases you can verify weren't yours. I spent hours in that office, piecing together the puzzle of Jessica's betrayal. Each new revelation was like a knife twist, but there was also something empowering about finally seeing the full picture. David was thorough, methodical. We created spreadsheets tracking every fraudulent transaction, mapped out timelines of her deceptions, gathered statements from the credit card companies confirming the unauthorized accounts. The case against her grew stronger by the hour. She clearly never expected you to find that flash drive, David observed. Her overconfidence will be her undoing. My hands shook slightly as I signed the last affidavit, and the stack of evidence we'd compiled was overwhelming. A paper trail of betrayal that would be impossible to explain away. For once, Jessica wouldn't be able to manipulate her way out of this. Sitting in the courtroom, I watched Jessica's carefully constructed world crumble piece by piece. My lawyer methodically presented evidence from her laptop, emails she'd forgotten to delete, thinking she was too clever to get caught. The first email appeared on the projector screen. Rick, such a boring fool. All work and no play. Can't wait to be rid of him and take what I deserve. My stomach churned as Jessica's words from 3 months ago glowed above us. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the table. Financial records flashed next, thousands transferred from our joint account to her private one. Luxury purchases, hotel stays, expensive gifts, all while I worked overtime thinking we were saving for our future. The judge's expression hardened with each new revelation. Jessica's lawyer attempted to object, claiming the financial records were taken out of context. Your Honor, my client had authorization to use these accounts. This is a clear invasion of privacy. The judge peered over his glasses. Objection overruled. Continue. Then came the recordings. My hands gripped the edge of the table as Jessica's voice filled the courtroom. He's so pathetic thinking I actually love him. But his bank account? Now that I love? Laughter followed, her voice and someone else's mixing together. I glanced at Jessica. Her usual confident smirk had vanished. She whispered frantically to her lawyer, who looked increasingly frustrated. Her perfect auburn hair seemed to droop, and the green eyes that once captivated me now darted around the room like a cornered animal. Your Honor, Jessica suddenly stood up. I was unhappy. Rick never gave me attention. Mrs. Turner, you will speak when addressed. The judge's voice cut through her protests like a knife. More evidence emerged, Credit card statements showing duplicate purchases, one for her lover. Messages to friends bragging about how she'd manipulated me into working longer hours so she could have more free time. The judge's gavel cracked against the sound block. "I've seen enough. Mrs. Turner, your attempts to portray yourself as the victim in this situation are not only unconvincing, but frankly insulting to this court's intelligence." Jessica's composure finally shattered. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. She tried one last time, "But, Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows a pattern of deceit, theft, and malicious intent. This court rules in favor of the plaintiff." Through it all, I just sat there, watching the woman I'd loved for 12 years reveal her true self to the world. The ruling was in my favor, but victory felt hollow. The real win was finally seeing the truth, painful as it was. Not long after I sat in my living room, scrolling through social media on my phone, Jessica's downfall played out like a tragic reality show across my screen. Her carefully curated image crumbled post by post, friend by friend. The truth about her affairs and manipulations spread through our social circle like wildfire. My phone buzzed with messages from mutual acquaintances. They shared screenshots of her desperate attempts to control the narrative, each one more pathetic than the last. Her lover Tom had gone public with their relationship's ugly details after she tried to blame him for everything. Other men came forward too, creating a domino effect that stripped away her carefully constructed facade. I watched her social media followers drop by the hundreds. The local country club where she'd spent countless hours networking quietly revoked her membership. Her real estate clients started pulling their listings. The life she'd built on lies and manipulation collapsed around her. From my now peaceful home, I observed it all with a strange detachment. There was no joy in watching her destruction, just relief that her toxicity no longer poisoned my life. The house, which had felt like a war zone for months, transformed into my refuge. I started the cleanup process methodically. Her designer clothes went into donation bags. The expensive artwork she'd insisted on buying disappeared from the walls. I repainted every room, erasing the colors she'd chosen. Each change felt like reclaiming another piece of myself. My friend Mike helped me haul out the pretentious furniture she'd bought to impress her social circle. We replaced it with comfortable pieces that actually felt like me. The formal dining room became my music room, housing my old guitar collection that Jessica had banished to the garage. The stuffy home office transformed into a workshop where I could tinker with my electronics projects. I found my old photography gear in the attic, covered in dust but still functional. Weekends that used to revolve around Jessica's social calendar now filled with hiking trips and photo shoots. The therapeutic click of the shutter helped quiet my mind. The local community center offered evening classes. I signed up for woodworking, something Jessica had dismissed as too blue-collar. The rhythmic motion of sanding wood and the satisfaction of creating something tangible helped ground me. My therapist called it mindfulness through activity. I called it peace. Old friends started dropping by more frequently. The house filled with genuine laughter instead of Jessica's forced social gatherings. We'd order pizza, watch sports, and talk about real things, not the superficial gossip that used to dominate my home. My brother brought over his kids, something Jessica had always discouraged because she worried about her expensive furnishings. Their energy filled the house with life. Crayon marks appeared on my new coffee table, and I left them there as badges of honor. Each day brought small victories. I learned to cook proper meals instead of relying on Jessica's meal delivery services. The garden, once a showcase of expensive but high-maintenance plants, became my weekend project. I replaced her exotic flowers with vegetables and herbs. The neighbors noticed the changes too. Mrs. Henderson from next door brought over homemade cookies, commenting on how much more lived-in the house felt. The prescription sleeping pills in my medicine cabinet gathered dust as natural exhaustion from actual living took their place. My therapist helped me understand that Jessica's collapse wasn't my victory. My recovery was. She taught me to recognize patterns, to understand how I'd let myself become so diminished in my own life. The sessions were hard, forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths about myself, but they were necessary. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in my redesigned living room, surrounded by the evidence of my rebuilding, and feel a profound sense of peace. The house no longer echoed with arguments or silently judged my inadequacies. It became a home again, my home, filled with the imperfect signs of a life actually being lived. I sat at my usual corner table in the daily grind, watching steam rise from my coffee. The last few months had shifted something inside me. The coffee shop had become my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe, think, and just be. My therapist suggested finding spaces that felt like my own, and this spot by the window, with its worn leather armchair and view of the bustling street, had become exactly that. The morning light filtered through the windows, casting warm patterns on my notebook. I'd started journaling, another suggestion that initially made me roll my eyes, but had proven surprisingly therapeutic. Looking back through the pages, I could trace my journey from those first raw entries filled with anger and confusion to more recent reflections marked by growing peace. My attention drifted to a couple outside, sharing a laugh over their pastries. There was a time when such a sight would have triggered a flood of bitter memories about Jessica. Now, it just felt like watching a scene from someone else's story. The sharp edges of betrayal had smoothed into something more manageable, more distant. A movement caught my eye as someone approached my table. Looking up, I met the gaze of a woman holding her own coffee cup. Her smile carried none of the practiced charm I'd grown wary of, just genuine warmth that reached her eyes. "Mind if I join you? All other tables are taken." The words flowed naturally between us after that. We talked about books, her work as a teacher, my recent discovery of hiking trails outside the city. No calculated pauses, no hidden agendas, no walking on eggshells. Just honest conversation that reminded me how communication should feel. It struck me then, the difference between this moment and countless others with Jessica. There was no performance here, no underlying current of manipulation. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt my shoulders fully relax in conversation with someone new. Taking a sip of my coffee, I realized something profound. Jessica's actions, her betrayal, they were just one chapter in my story. An important one, yes, but not the defining one. The book didn't end with her, and these pages were mine to fill. I lifted my cup slightly, a quiet gesture to myself and to new beginnings. The coffee was perfect, not too hot anymore, not too bitter, just right for this moment of clarity, this acknowledgement of how far I'd come and the path ahead. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed the story, remember to like, subscribe, and comment on the video for more stories like this. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. If you have any similar stories to share, leave them in the comments and we'll make sure to bring them to life. Thanks for watching.